Wow, this week really is the gift that just keeps on giving when it comes to internet rants. I made a video a few days ago criticising some of the creative choices in Game of Thrones this season, and it was pretty interesting to peruse the comments section. In amongst the death threats and the polite suggestions for which objects I should insert into myself, there was a pretty common thread that emerged. Just wait until episode 3, son. So yesterday I duly settled down with my pint of whiskey and I did just that. And wow, I was not prepared for what happened in the next 90 minutes. This could well be the episode that finally jumps the shark for Game of Thrones. I mean, let's be clear about one thing before I go any further. From a production point of view, The Long Night is easily the most ambitious and action-packed 90 minutes that Game of Thrones has ever delivered. Shit man, it makes most movies look cheap and tacky by comparison. The battle scenes are brutal, visceral and epic in scale, the actors do a great job of selling it, and the special effects are absolutely flawless. All in all, visually, I just can't fault it. Right, so that's the praise out of the way, let's talk shittiness. So the episode begins with the army of the dead finally arriving at Winterfell. Now there's nothing left to do but stand and fight. Outside the walls there's a bunch of different armies assembled for the defence. There's Dothraki cavalry out in front, the Unsullied backing them up, and a bunch of wildlings here and there. Oh, and they have a bunch of trebuchets there as well. Meanwhile, Bran is acting as bait for the Night King in the Godswood, and Theon and a bunch of archers are standing guard over him. The plan, if you can call it that, is for the forces outside to hold off the White Walkers, buying time for Theon and his mates to kill the Night King when he goes after Bran. Wow, really hope the guy shows up in person to handle this, otherwise their plan's totally screwed. So the Red Lady shows up for some reason and sets all the Dothraki swords on fire with her magic, and they're all happy, so they ride off into battle without any support and then they die. So that's the cavalry gone then. Now it's up to the infantry to hold the line by themselves. And they also abandon the trebuchets after using them like once because, you know, why would you want to protect those massive artillery pieces that can bombard your enemy with flaming missiles from long range? I can't help but think they're not making best use of their military resources here. I mean, I'm no expert on medieval warfare, but I'm pretty sure sending all your cavalry in an unsupported frontal assault against a superior enemy force isn't going to end well. It looks visually impressive, of course, but ultimately it's kinda pointless and self-defeating, like a ginger person trying to sunbathe. And setting your artillery out in front of your infantry where you can't protect it or use it effectively just makes no sense at all. So anyway, the White Walkers charge and the battle proper gets going. This is where my usually stunning and insightful narrative is gonna falter a bit, because it's kinda hard to make sense of what goes on next. Partly because there's no sense of where all the different characters are in relation to each other, and partly because it's so fucking dark I can barely see what's happening. I mean, I watched this in my office, at night, with the lights turned off, and even then I was struggling to make out who was doing what. I actually thought Brienne died at least twice because she kept getting pinned down and screaming like a girl as if she was being bitten and stabbed, but then in the next scene she was back up and fighting again. Weird. Anyway, so there's a bunch of violent shit going on and it's hard to know who's dead and who's still alive. People are fighting and dying all over the place, arrows are raining down, and Jon and Dany use their dragons to repeatedly napalm the White Walkers. Holy shit, everyone's getting fucked up, man. It's like last orders at my local. But despite all this, they can't hold their positions, so they're forced to fall back inside Winterfell, and most of the Unsullied die covering their retreat. The survivors get inside and then they bar the gates. Meanwhile, Tyrion and Sansa take refuge in the crypts below Winterfell with the women and children, because it's safe down there. For now. And Sansa talks about how it's best they stay there because they're basically useless everywhere else. That might be the most meta comment you've ever made, Sansa. So the White Walkers breach the walls and they overwhelm the defenders, and a zombie giant breaks through the gate and he kills a bunch of soldiers and he bats Lady Mormont aside like a toy. But then something happens. Something that made me cringe so hard that my spinal column almost parted company with the rest of my body. Remember in my last Game of Thrones video when I joked she would end up killing a dozen White Walkers all by herself to prove how badass little girls can really be? Now, I was totally taking the piss when I said that, but damn if she doesn't go one better just to prove me right. So she gets up, despite half the bones in her body probably being shattered by the impact, and charges straight at the zombie giant like this is Dark Souls 3 or something. And instead of just stomping on her, it picks her up and crushes her in its hand, like me trying to eat a badly packed kebab at 2 in the morning. Then it holds her conveniently close to its face so she can stab it in the eye with dragon glass and kill it. I'm not kidding, she kills a zombie giant single-handed. Fuck off, show. So everyone's fighting and the Hound has a panic attack for some reason, because, war isn't really his thing. But then he sees Arya's in trouble, so he snaps out of it and he goes to help her along with Beric. Meanwhile, Arya runs inside and she plays hide and seek with some zombies in the library. Kinda reminds me of fucking around with the guards in Metal Gear Solid back in the day.
Whose footprints are these?
I don't know why you're going over there, pal. But then she escapes and hooks up with the Hound, and Beric dies because he can't run fast enough. Meanwhile, Jon and Dany are duking it out with the Night King on their dragons. I honestly couldn't tell what the fuck was going on in this sequence, because it's shot in hyper-spaz vision like a Michael Bay movie, but the upshot seems to be that the Night King gets knocked off his dragon and he lands just outside Winterfell. Dany tries flaming him, but fire does nothing apparently, so she runs away. And Jon lands and runs towards the Night King to fight him, but he reanimates all the dead bodies around them and Jon just stops in his tracks like a total asshole, as if the guy's gonna let him walk away or something. But Dany saves the day by flaming them all. Jon runs inside to Winterfell to kill the Night King, and Dany just kinda sits there on the ground like an idiot until a bunch of zombies attack her dragon, and it panics and throws her off. But then Jorah shows up and they fight together and then he dies. Anyway, Theon and his archers are in the Godswood trying to protect Bran, while he spazzes out in his wheelchair. Then the Night King shows up and Theon dies. So now there's no one left between him and Bran. This is the final moment. Everyone's getting fucked up and all hope seems lost. Jon gets ambushed by the zombie dragon and he gets angry and shouts at it because he can't think of anything else to do. Fuck off, show. The Night King looks down on Bran, ready to strike the killer blow. This is the moment that's been coming for 8 seasons. Are we finally going to hear him speak? Will we get to see what strange force binds the two of them together? Are we going to learn some shocking revelation about his motives and intentions? Will we finally understand why he's doing this, what he really wants, or where he even comes from? I can't do this. You're going to have to excuse me for a moment. Oh god, that's better. So where was I? Oh yeah. So Arya jumps down from somewhere and she kills the Night King and that's it, game over.
Oh man! Oh god! Oh man! Oh god! Oh man!
Yup, that's a thing which happens. She comes at him like a spider monkey from somewhere. The Night King grabs her in midair, but she knifes him in the chest and then he dies. And the entire White Walker army dies with him. What the actual fuck is this? I guess we're never going to get any of those questions answered then. I'm trying to think of something to compare this plot choice with. Nah, drawn a blank, sorry. This has to rank as one of the strangest creative choices I can remember. I mean, it's not just the fact that the Night King and the White Walkers have been the most heavily built up enemies since Thanos, and they've just been wiped out by a small girl with a knife. It's not the fact that we waited 8 seasons for this confrontation, only to have it end with the most anticlimactic death possible. It's not even the fact that we'll probably never get any answers to the questions that have hung around these creatures since we first saw them. My question is, why Arya of all people? What's her stake in this? I mean, she's had absolutely no involvement with the White Walkers or the Night King up until this point. She's never fought them, never seen what they can do, never lost friends or family to them. She has absolutely no personal history in this, and yet she's the one who kills the Night King. Why? If you really can't see how this damages the show's storytelling on a fundamental level, then you should probably go and rewatch The Last Jedi, because I'm sure it's your favourite movie ever. It would be like when Luke and Darth Vader are fighting each other in The Return of the Jedi, and all of a sudden Chewbacca shows up and he shoots Vader in the back and kills him. It just feels so undeserved. But Drinker, you highly abrasive yet oddly arousing paragon of wisdom, I hear you say, Arya's been training for years for this kind of thing. She's studied under some of the greatest killers in Westeros, and if it bleeds, she can kill it. Well, hypothetical person, I certainly agree that Arya's a fun little bundle of death who has a very unique set of skills, but the problem is those skills are geared towards a very unique situation. She's an assassin, not a warrior. She's the kind of person who'd sneak into your bedroom in the middle of the night and smother you with your own pillow. And seeing her take part in a major battle like this just feels like she's been awkwardly shoehorned into a situation that she isn't suited to. And I guess the obvious question is, why didn't Jon get to do this? It's kind of his thing after all. His entire character arc since season 1 has revolved around the White Walkers. He spent years trying to make everyone put aside their petty rivalries and recognise the existential threat they pose, and yet he plays almost no part in their destruction. While this final battle is playing out, he's busy yelling at a dragon that's about to flame him. It feels like he's been written out of his own storyline. Instead, the glory goes to this smug, unstoppable, overpowered Mary Sue, who's already caused more premature deaths than the fat positivity movement. A character that the producers have already pushed way beyond her original arc out of some desperate need to keep her relevant to the story. On the other hand, they seem determined to hold back Jon at every opportunity, limiting his agency and preventing him from taking any decisive actions. It's like they resent him for even being in this show, which is funny because his is one of the best character journeys in the entire saga. You know, in my last video I suggested that Game of Thrones was increasingly pandering to feminism and identity politics, letting men do most of the grunt work only to stumble and fail so that women can sweep in and snatch the glory, and to be honest, this episode kind of vindicates that opinion. It's a shame that they seem to be falling at the final hurdle like this. Game of Thrones' narrative structure's been wavering since it ran out of book material to guide it, and this episode is proof for me that the writers really don't seem to know what they're doing anymore. Overall, I'm not going to be hyperbolic and say this is the last Jedi of the Game of Thrones series, mainly because I didn't want to kill myself and everyone around me once it was done, but it's definitely a weak point in a show that's been fairly strong up until recently. So needless to say, I'm pretty apprehensive about the last 3 episodes, because I genuinely think they're losing the plot here. I mean, I'll watch them because I've got 8 years invested in this show and I want to see how it ends, but I'm really not sure there's enough booze in the world to get me through it. Anyway, that's all I have for today, thank God. Go away now.